I really don't know how to start these introductions, like the start of these, but welcome back to Chaotic Crime. Good morning, good midday, good evening, whatever it may be when you choose to listen to this. But hello and welcome back for another episode. And it's actually the last episode of our June season, which is our unsolved and unresolved cases. So I'm going to bring you guys a really, really crazy case to finish this off. And I'm sure you guys are wondering what we're going to be doing for July. So, drum roll, please. We are going to be doing, and if you're on our Instagram, you've probably already seen this, but we are going to be doing double lives and deception for the month of July. So, we're going to bring you a bunch of different cases that are just centered around people that are living double lives, people that are really good at lying. And we're going to bring you some cases where the deception carries on for a really long time before the truth is revealed. So I'm super excited for July. But for now, we're still in June. So we're going to finish this one off with a banger because I think that's what needs to happen. Now, another thing that I want to say is I don't know if I'm going to get the visuals out on this episode when the audio drops. So I apologize for that. I think the visuals will have to come a little bit later. I'm a little bit behind on editing. I say a little bit, quite a bit. So please bear with me. I'm sorry, but I wanted to make sure that I was still dropping this one so we could move on with July. So with all my jibber jabber now being done, I think it's time we crack into today's case. We're going to be covering a case that grabbed me and it still won't let go. So today we're diving into the strange and eerie disappearance of Sandra Hughes, a woman who strangely vanished in 2020. Now I will put a disclaimer in because some of this case you've kind of got to be a little bit more open-minded. So as always, we're going to do our best to cover everything, all the tiny nitty-gritty details and everything that I could scoop up on this case. So buckle up, because it's not often that a case rattles me, but this one has really rattled me. As always, we are going to start with the person that our story centers around, and that is who is Sandra Hughes. So Sandra Hughes was 54 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was a trained naturalist, and she lived for the outdoors. But more than that, she was also experienced in the outdoors. She was no stranger to the woods. Now, she'd actually moved back to California shortly before she disappeared, and she had been living in Hawaii for some time. Sandra was described by her friends and her family as independent, resourceful, and someone who deeply loved nature and solitude. Now, at the time of Sandra's disappearance, it's important to put in the backs of our mind that she was grieving the loss of her mother, something that seemed to really impact her deeply. One of Sandra's main ways of dealing with hard times or dark times was spending time alone in nature, which was very much in line with how she processed things. It's also been noted throughout this investigation that during the pandemic, Sandra took this time to solo travel a lot, and she spent a lot of time in the outdoors and in the wilderness by herself. So this wasn't uncommon of her to just disappear and be outdoors camping, hiking, doing all of that, and I'm guessing being off the radar for days on end. So it's reported that Sandra last spoke with her family on the 26th of June. Now, this is when she told her family that she was going to camp alone in the Sierra National Forest. She appeared to sound very excited about her trip, as she'd spent the last 6 months in California, often camping alone and gaining plenty of experience during this time. Now, like I said, people already knew her to be an outdoor expert, and she was even described as a survivalist. So given all of this information and putting all of these factors into our mind, when she said she was going to go camp alone, it wasn't uncommon of her. It didn't raise any alarms to anybody. Everyone actually reported this was so normal that they didn't second guess a thing. So with all of this at hand, it looks like Sandra begun her trip. Okay, so I'm going to put a little breakdown of some of the information I've been able to gather up about Sandra's last known movements. So on June 26th of 2020, Sandra set up camp in Sierra National Forest. And she set up near the Johnson Meadows area because Sierra National Forest is a large area. When I get the visuals up, I'll put it, but there'll also be visuals on our Instagram. So definitely go and check that out. Now, she was spotted on the 26th of June by two hikers walking barefoot near her campsite. The hikers did state that she seemed disorientated and she appeared to be bruised, but she seemed to be coherent enough to talk. They did, of course, ask her if she was okay, and she declined help, saying that she was okay. Okay, so this next part is where the story gets a little bit more unsettling and maybe a little bit confusing as well, because it's hard. I mean, it's obviously hard to track a case like this when you just don't have all the answers. But this is what I've been able to find out. Now, if I've missed something, if I'm wrong, please let me know. Dates are also really all over the place, but these are the rough dates I've been able to gather. So on July 1st of 2020, a couple of campers hiking near the Johnson Meadows, just above what is known as the Brass Lake, located within that Sierra National Forest, stumbled across a random campsite, and it appeared that the campsite was abandoned. These hikers described it as eerie, and it looked as though the campsite had been completely ransacked and destroyed. A bunch of random items had been tossed and discarded across the site. The campers then found a folder which appeared to contain some pretty important documents, things such as a birth certificate and a social security card. If you guys have been here for other episodes, you know how hard it is for me to get that one out. I don't know what it is. Social security card. I just have to say it slowly. So with how destroyed the campsite was and the documentation in hand, they did feel as though something was wrong. So they flagged this with the authorities. Once the police arrived at the campsite, they found the documents had belonged to a Sandra Hughes. Now, at this point, it's important to note that Sandra wasn't actually considered a missing person. She hadn't been reported missing. Like we now know, it wasn't unlike Sandra to not be in contact during these periods that she was outdoors. However, the police still did find it odd that her belongings were just spread and abandoned like that. So the police did begin to look for Sandra because they wanted to make sure that she was okay and at least relieve any suspicions that they had or potential gut feelings that they had that something was off. So I want to give you guys an idea of what it looks like the campsite was reported to have looked like at this time. Her tent was flattened. Her belongings appeared to be scattered across a wide area, so not a normal sort of packing up situation. Food and personal items and hiking gear was all still there. It was all still just left behind. Now, her car was actually found crashed into a tree nearby. Now, we'll get to that part in a second. So I want us to all kind of think about this for a second, given what we know about Sandra, just based off what we've already heard. She's an experienced camper. So these are the dot points that I've come up with that make me feel like this is not your typical got lost in the woods scenario. So you've got an experienced camper who sets up camp, crashes their car, then they're seen barefoot, bruised, but you say you're okay. And then days later, your entire site is found abandoned with absolutely no sight of you. Something genuinely feels off about that, right? Like I'm not just making that up. But anyway, we're going to carry on because it's going to continue to feel off. So like I said, the authorities did begin to look for Sandra. And to be honest, they didn't really find anything at this time. Now, this is where the story gets even more strange and even more confusing. Remember how I said that Sandra's car was found crashed? This is what we appear to know about that crash. I also want to note the date I've got for this is July 4th. I don't know if that's correct or not. Something about that date didn't feel right to me, but that's the date I've got. So I'm going to put that in there and we're going to roll with it. But it's been reported that on July 4th, Sandra crashes her car. So she actually crashed her car near the Chiquita Pass trailhead, and this is located within the Madera County. This site is not too far from where her abandoned campsite was located. The car crash didn't appear to look like it had been severe. Other campers actually supposedly were around at the time of this incident. They stated that Sandra somehow collided with a tree, leaving her vehicle high-centered on a slump within the ravine. Given the witnesses' statements and the information that the police have been given, it kind of shows that Sandra didn't appear to be going very fast at the time of this incident. Now, the other campers around did, of course, ask Sandra if she needed any help. However, Sandra refused any assistance at this point. She said she was okay, and then she was seen walking towards the woods alone. And what happened after that has never been explained. So it was at this point that Sandra was officially reported missing, with authorities growing more and more concerned about her after the reported car accident, and then, of course, not being able to locate her after they found her campsite. So I'm going to jump ahead for a second here, and I'm going to talk about some reported sightings. And then we're going to jump back and talk about the investigation more in a second. Because over the next several days, Sandra was actually reportedly seen on 2 separate occasions by 2 separate people. So on July 5th, the day after her campsite was found, 2 hikers hiking near the forest reportedly saw a woman matching Sandra's description. She was barefoot, bruised, and appearing dazed. At this time, the campers weren't aware that Sandra was a missing person. Otherwise, maybe more would have been done. However, it did leave them concerned enough to look further into her and then escalated it, of course, reporting the sighting. It's noted that they did try to ask her if she was okay and asked if she needed any help, as they did state that she appeared to be slightly distressed at this time. These campers kind of made a comment that it seemed like Sandra wasn't really there. Sandra reportedly didn't actually respond to any of these questions, and she kind of just ignored anybody that was talking to her at all. And she just continued to walk further into the woods into another direction alone. Okay, so now let's go back to the investigation. So the police ended up bringing in multiple agencies to help with a large-scale search, which began in early July of 2020. So this involves search and rescue teams, helicopters, tracking dogs, and drones, which were all deployed in an attempt to help locate Sandra. Now, at first, they did find nothing, but a few days later, they actually located Sandra's sleeping bag. Now, they located her sleeping bag inside Yosemite National Park. Now, this was 2.5 miles from the crash site. So, for all my Aussie people out there, 2.5 miles is about 4 Ks. The investigators were able to figure out that this was Sandra's sleeping bag as they based it off an REI purchase. So I'm not sure what that is. I should probably have looked that up before I got on here, but I had so much more to look up. So that I actually forgot to do that now that I'm reading that. So can somebody tell me what that is? Is that like a bank transaction? I'm not sure. But nevertheless, this was how they were able to figure out that this was Sandra's. Okay, so here's where I start to get frustrated in the investigation because none of the sightings that we spoke about were followed by Sandra being found. There was no other physical evidence that was recovered at any other locations. So we're kind of just in like a maddening limbo at this point. And the authorities are starting to lose hope in finding Sandra alive. So where did that actually leave the investigation? The authorities have stated that they do not suspect foul play. But I want to be honest, I feel like that's of course based around the lack of evidence. There's no presence of evidence that links to foul play, but it doesn't necessarily mean that foul play didn't have any part in this. So some have speculated that Sandra may have wanted to intentionally disappear as well. The investigators have brought this up as well. Another thing that the investigators have brought up as a possibility is that Sandra could have gotten a head injury from the car accident, making her disorientated, suffering memory loss, brain injury, doesn't know what's going on. Okay, so another thing that was found that I haven't mentioned yet is there was footprints found at Sandra's campsite. Now, these footprints did suggest to the authorities that Sandra left on her own accord. They were single footprints and they were leading away from the campsite. These footprints also proved that she was barefoot at that time. So the investigation froze up at this point until a month passed, and it had been a month since Sandra left for that camping trip, and another reported sighting came in. Now, this reported sighting came in by 2 hunters, and they were pretty damn adamant that it was Sandra. They stated they seen her leaning up against a tree, and this was right near the site in which she crashed her car the month prior. It's noted that Sandra made eye contact with the 2 hunters, but she didn't try to flag them down for help, and he did state that she didn't appear to be distressed at this point. But he did state that she looked notably thinner than what she looked in the photos shown on the media and in her missing person posters. So after this sighting, the case just kind of went cold again. Nothing really seemed to come of it, and the police just sort of seemed to lose hope altogether. So with every case, I like to include a part where I talk about the family, because I haven't really spoken about Sandra's family too much throughout this one, because there is so much to cover in this case in regards to all these sightings and all this strangeness that sort of stems around it. But I do want to say and highlight that her family have not given up hope. The families are the ones who keep the light on for their loved ones. They're the ones who don't give up and who don't stop fighting. And Sandra's family is no different, especially her aunt and her closest friends. And they have fought so hard to keep this case in the public eye. They've created a Facebook group and a public campaign that's dedicated to finding Sandra. They've worked with private investigators in an attempt to try to locate Sandra or find something that the authorities and investigators couldn't. They organised so many volunteer searches in the months after her disappearance. And they pushed so hard for more aggressive searches from law enforcement. And they have made it very clear that their opinion stands that they do not believe that Sandra voluntarily disappeared. Some reports state that they do believe she was in trouble, disorientated, and that something happened that prevented her coming out of those woods. So if this case wasn't already hard enough, a massive fire broke out in that area in September of 2020, and it lasted for months on end. It burned up any potential evidence that we could have had to actually maybe close this case. This fire actually changed the terrain. But one really shocking factor to note is Sandra's car didn't burn at all. And yeah, you're probably thinking, what the fuck? Authorities left Sandra's car there? Yeah, they left her car there. And I want to explain to you why they left her car there. So they had left Sandra's car there after they found it. They didn't remove this, and they actually done it in an attempt to see if Sandra would potentially come back to her vehicle. With all of Sandra's outdoor experience and her survivalist energy and skills, and all of these multiple potential sightings of her, it really did seem like she maybe could be out there somewhere still alive. However, after this fire broke out, the authorities did remove Sandra's vehicle from this site, as the car still remained untouched, and it was clear to authorities that she was not going to be coming back to her vehicle. So again, we've got a cold case. And the authorities shutting the door, which I want to note, I'm not one to be brutal on that. I can't blame them. I can't imagine their fight and how many cases they have and how many people are breathing down their neck to do better in investigations. And to be honest, this one is baffling. So there was literally no movement in this case at all until almost 1 year to the date of Sandra's disappearance. In July of 2021, now I want to note I am here to give you goosebumps, so buckle up for this next part, because this is where I need you to keep an open mind. So in July of 2021, a family decided to go camping in the CHAOITC Peak area. So about halfway through the day, the family reportedly stopped and ate lunch. And this is when their 3-year-old son began to point out of the window. And he was pointing towards an open meadow. This was when he told his parents that there was a woman laying face down with her legs up in the air. Now I know. You don't have to say it. I know I won't hear you say it, but I can hear you say it. Just bear with me. But that is strange, right? That's strange either way. But still bear with me because it's about to get stranger and I need you to just keep that mind open. Now, this boy told his parents that the woman wasn't able to walk or talk because she was dead, but that she desperately needed their help. This actually freaked the boy's parents out so bad that they did go and check out the meadow. And at this point, they were actually completely prepared and expecting to find a dead body at this point. They believed their son that much. That's how much this freaked them out. And I'm guessing that's how off that's not like normal behavior for their 3-year-old. He doesn't come out with this sort of stuff. And also, I don't think many 3-year-olds would come out with that stuff. But I'm getting carried away in my own opinion here. We will carry on. So they looked around this meadow and they didn't find anyone or anything. No one was there. So they went back to the car and the 3-year-old was still pointing at the meadow saying, she's standing right there. He was literally saying things like, I'm pointing right at her. Now, he told his parents that this woman he saw was wearing blue jeans, a black top, and that she had blue hair. Now, this was Sandra's exact description. Exact description of what she was wearing the last time she was seen alive. Exact description to a T. He didn't miss or skip a beat on that. It's important to state that at that point, his parents didn't know who Sandra was, hadn't heard of her, didn't know she was missing. So this didn't click to them when he said that. I'm just letting you guys know ahead of time that that was Sandra's description to a T, because I'm dropping bombs early for you guys so that you don't get, feel like I'm withholding. So this actually freaked the little boy's parents out so bad that they packed up and they went home early at this point. When they got home, they decided that they were so freaked out that they wanted to try to share the experience and maybe see if somebody else had experienced anything in that area, whether this was a common thing. Maybe this family was a little bit more open to ghosts, other spirits, things like that. I don't know. So they went straight to Facebook. And they basically posted their experience to Facebook to see if anybody knew about the area. Now, this is when they found out who Sandra Hughes was. And they figured out that this description that their 3-year-old had given them matched her description to a T. They also found out that they were actually within 5 miles, which is 8 Ks, of where Sandra was last seen alive. So I think in an attempt to see whether they were going crazy, how real this all really was, they gave their 3-year-old a bunch of photos. And basically these photos contained several women in them that were sort of that matched that same description. And within those photos was Sandra. Now they done this on 3 separate occasions with their 3-year-old. And every single time he picked Sandra out, every time, no matter how many photos they gave him, how many different women, whether they gave more photos of Sandra, less, he always picked her. So the Madera County Sheriff actually somehow got a hold of this post that this family posted on Facebook when they were trying to gather information about the area. And they reached out to the family in an attempt to get more information. I'm guessing the authorities at this point sort of thought there's no harm in trying something else. The case was already cold. Why not try and go and search the area? So the police actually took the little boy and the little boy's father back to the area or the meadow where he had spotted the ghost or that Sandra sighting, that woman matching Sandra's description. And the police swept and searched and scaled the area, but unfortunately they weren't able to come up with anything. Now, I do want to note that I feel like police did give this one a good crack because over the years it seems like they conducted many searches in an attempt to try to find Sandra. And then, of course, we know about the volunteer searches that Sandra's family did set up themselves as well. And honestly, it seems like she just vanished into thin air sometimes because they haven't been able to find anything. I think there have been a fair few more sightings of Sandra over the years. I don't have time to go through every single one of them. And of course, none of these sightings appear to have backed up in finding Sandra. Like there was a potential sighting in August, I'm not too sure of what year, and the sighting was never confirmed, but it was nearby the town of Beeson Road. And like I said, that sighting wasn't confirmed, but I believe there are many more. If you want more of a breakdown, let me know. But there's definitely more, and I'm going to link some more info on this case where you guys can further deep dive as well. So there's three main theories in this investigation, and that is accidental disappearance and injury, which is that Sandra may have hit her head in that car accident. She may have become disorientated and wandered too far to be found. And of course, the footprints do support this theory in the authorities' eyes. Theory two is, of course, a voluntary disappearance, which the family has backed that they do not believe she done this at all. Some say Sandra may have chosen to disappear. But again, those who knew her really, really dispute this. She left personal items behind, food, she left hiking gear, she left heaps of essential items, and that is not consistent with someone who was trying to stay gone. And then, of course, theory three is foul play. So some believe foul play could have been involved. Some of the last sightings of Sandra, she appeared to be bruised and disorientated. And then her flattened tent and her scattered items all around her campsite, you can't tell me that doesn't raise some kind of red flag. And of course, I know that could be animals, that could be this, that could be that, but we just can't be sure, right? So we can't rule everything out. So there are, of course, no clear suspects and there's no clear evidence. And law enforcement have stated that they really don't believe that foul play was involved. I think either way, all this evidence leaves us with so many questions. And I mean, the biggest question of all is, where is Sandra Hughes? So generally, I wish I could break down a little bit more, but as of 2025, Sandra still has not been found. So no trace has been found since those earlier reported sightings. The case does remain open, but it has gone cold. And of course, Sandra's family continue to fight for answers, and they continue to keep this case alive and keep it in the public eye, which is why I brought it to you today. So we should be talking about this case more, because while it's eerie and it's scary, and I know it leaves us with a lot of questions, this is a woman who has ultimately disappeared with no trace, that is still missing, and her family, her friends, they all deserve answers. So please share this case. Share it around, talk about it, have a cup of coffee and discuss what you think. So if you're from the area where Sandra went missing, please share this around if this managed to get to you. Please keep your eyes open as well, and please contact the authorities, link below if you have any information. I'm also going to link the Australian authorities below because I always do that too, guys. Don't worry. I got a lot of Aussie listeners. There's a fair few UK people here too. Got a few from the States as well. Hello. Lots of mixed listeners, which honestly, it blows me away that you guys are all here and you all want to listen to me, and it makes me want to cry. So thank you. I'm not going to get emotional though. I promise myself I wouldn't cry this episode. So that is it for today's episode of Chaotic Crime. This one really, really gets under your skin. And it's a really scary reminder that we can even vanish in broad daylight. So as always, if you've got any thoughts or theories on this case, please share them. I love when you guys send me emails. It makes me cry when the emails roll in. Oh my God, it's happening again. I can't talk about it because it's just like, it's nice to know that there's a community of people out there that are as wiki whack as me. So thank you for being here. And thank you for being patient with me as well, because sometimes life gets busy, but I promised I'd bring you guys something, and I'm doing that. So, like I said, the visuals on this will probably be out a little bit later, and I apologize for that, but I will still upload the audio recording to YouTube for all of you people that want to listen on YouTube, and then I'll get the visuals up in hopefully a couple of days. And that is, until next time, stay loud, stay curious, and never stop asking questions.